Hello lovelies, there's only one thing worth talking about at the moment, that's the rolling clusterfuck of the Patreon situation. Patreon is a subscription service where you can directly subscribe to creators, like me, and you get things in exchange. I give people discounts, allow people to suggest videos that I should make, early access, stuff like that. There's a whole shit ton of stuff you can do with it. Now, a lot of people on YouTube, particularly in the kind of news and politics and commentary sphere, moved part of their income model over to Patreon after the apocalypse. That was when YouTube started in a panic, censoring a whole bunch of people and downlisting their videos and so on, after a bunch of hit pieces saying that adverts were being rolled on extremist content, which they were, just not very much and not very many, and the reaction was completely disproportionate to what was going on. But people coped by moving over to Patreon. Now, quite a while back now, Lauren Southern and a few others, more on the right, edging towards far right end of the spectrum, were booted from Patreon. This was supposedly because of what was called manifest observable behaviour, in that Lauren was engaged in activism, some of it was potentially dangerous, and so on. Back then, a few people abandoned the platform on principle, a few backers abandoned the platform on principle, but not too many, because that was kind of over there on the extreme end, and a lot of people could see something reasonable in the way that she was being censored. It made some kind of sense, and Jack from Patreon went around a whole bunch of places, did interviews, talked about how and why this went on, and gave people reassurances which have been proven to now be total horseshit. So there was another wave of bannings, perhaps the most significant one being Sargon of Akkad, who is a YouTube commentator and involved in politics and so on. I don't like him much anymore. I think he slid too far to the right for me. I don't think he's a skeptic. I think his views on Europe are childish and misguided, but that's by the by. People who disagree with me, even people who I hate, still have rights and still deserve to be treated fairly by platforms like Patreon, right? Right. There's people unironically calling him a fascist, people going on this, know nothing about the situation or why he was banned. They just go with what they're told. That's kind of disappointing to see. For all that he may have joined UKIP and all these other things, calling him a fascist is about 12 steps too far for me. And honestly, even if he was, I think he'd still have a right to free expression, and if people wanted to support him, they should be able to. All of that beside the point. Now a whole bunch of people, a much bigger bunch of people, some of them heavy hitters, are either pulling their support from Patreon, so they're no longer supporting people with payments through Patreon, or if there's someone that uses Patreon to reach their fans, some of them are pulling out. And some big ones, like Sam Harris, who's like the 13th highest grossing person on Patreon. Him stepping back from there is not insignificant, and this is all in protest of this censorship and uneven application of terms of service and all these other issues that we've come to know about. They wanted to shit-can Sargon for They wanted to shit-can Sargon for his political opinions, his stances, things like that. They were looking for an excuse. They found one. They got shot of him. Again, I don't agree with the dude on very much at all anymore, but still, this is a matter of principle. So a whole bunch of people have pulled out. The trouble with this is there is nowhere else to go. There have been attempts at alternatives. Back when Lauren Southern was the victim, Maker Support came to prominence, and a whole bunch of people signed up on Maker Support, which basically provided the same service as Patreon, or something very, very similar at least. People could subscribe to you, money would come to you, you could give them rewards based on tiers of payment and so on. And it allowed artists, commentators, videographers, anyone who makes stuff to get a bit more money and to make their situation a bit more livable, because being an artist is hard. Being a creator is hard. It's hard to make money at it, and some of us are just driven to create. That got shit canned. People are saying that it was a scam or whatever, much as they're now saying about the next one. I don't think it was. The problem was that the payment processors, in this case, told them, you can't use our service anymore. A whole bunch of money went missing, but that was because of the payment processors like Stripe, like PayPal, who've chosen to intercede and to censor, and so maker support went belly up. Similarly, after this spate of bannings and so on, another alternative came to the fore. Subscribestar. I set up over there because I knew people were going to be pulling out. A lot of other people did, but within a day they could no longer process payments via PayPal or Stripe. So there is nowhere to go, at least at the moment, because anywhere that you do go that offers this kind of service is immediately going to get gang fucked by a bunch of activists screaming at payment processors and so on. Do you know you're supporting fascism, even when it's not fascists or anything of the sort? So there's nowhere to go. You know, if your Patreon alternative is willing to accept your content, if you're controversial or an adult worker or a sex worker or whatever else, if they're willing to support you, then the payment processors will fuck you. And if the payment processors don't fuck you, the banks will fuck you. So we'd need an entire chain alternative for all of these services, all of these things, in order to have somewhere safe to go. I'm unlikely to be censored on these platforms, because I'm just not that controversial, despite what Twitter thinks. Yeah, I'm pretty moderate, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a problem. Yeah, it does worry me, but I can't afford to pull out of Patreon. And that's even though I'm only earning a bit over $100 a month from there. That makes a huge difference to those kind of shoestring budget that I'm typically on. So I can't afford to pull out. And the thing is, when you do pull out of Patreon, if you're someone who subscribes to people there, you're not really punishing Patreon, you're punishing the creator. The creator is losing the far more significant amount of their income. Patreon could take the hit pretty easily. So I would ask you, I would implore you not to pull out of Patreon until there is an alternative, but rather write a strongly worded letter or email to Patreon, letting them know that as soon as there is an alternative, you're out of there because you don't like what they've been doing, censoring people, blocking people from making certain kinds of content and hosting it there, all of that kind of thing. It was founded on idealism, so yeah, that is a way to kind of dig at them a bit, I think, and possibly get them to shift their position. Though they do seem to be doubling down a lot at the moment, and that's a concern as well. Crypto, people are going to say, use cryptocurrency. It's not user-friendly, it's not easy to turn into real money, it's just not there yet. Maybe one day. It is a use for crypto, it's an actual use for crypto, but it's just not there for the kind of the masses yet. It's just not good enough. This was a shitty thing to do right before Christmas, Patreon, take away people's livelihoods arbitrarily, and you should feel bad about it, and I hope Santa takes a big old shit in your stockings. Zang.
They call me backdoor Santa. I make my runs about the break of day. They call me backdoor Santa.